Welcome back to Crime Stories. Make sure subscribe and turn on notification. Detective Alan Carter had seen many disturbing cases in his career, but nothing prepared him for what he was about to face in the quiet town of Rockford. It started with a simple missing persons report. Lisa Carter, a 27-year-old schoolteacher, had vanished without a trace. Her house was locked, her car was still parked in the driveway, and her phone was found on the nightstand. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary, until Alan checked the CCTV footage from her street. At exactly 2:13 a.m., a tall, thin man appeared at the edge of the frame. He stood completely still under a dim streetlight, his face barely visible. What could be seen, however, was horrifying. A grotesque, unnatural grin stretched across his face. He remained there for almost 15 minutes before slowly tilting his head, as if listening to something. Then, without warning, he walked straight toward Lisa's house. The footage cut to static. Alan felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen many unsettling things in his career, but something about this man's behavior made his skin crawl. Digging deeper into past cases, Alan discovered a terrifying pattern. Over the last 2 years, 5 people had disappeared under nearly identical circumstances. Each case had one common factor: the smiling man. Determined to stop the disappearances, Alan set out to patrol Lisa's neighborhood that very night. He parked his car near her home and watched the dimly lit street in silence. Hours passed without incident. But then, as the clock struck 2:13 a.m., Alan spotted something. A figure, standing perfectly still beneath the streetlight. It was him. The smiling man stood motionless, his eyes locked on Lisa's now abandoned house. Alan's breath hitched as he studied the figure. The man's grin seemed almost inhuman, his lips stretched too far, his teeth unnaturally large and perfectly aligned. Alan reached for his gun and stepped out of the car. "Sir, stay where you are," he called out, his voice steady. The smiling man did not respond. Instead, he tilted his head slowly, just as he had in the video. Then, in a terrifyingly smooth motion, he began to walk directly toward Alan. Alan raised his weapon. "Stop. Hands where I can see them." Still, the smiling man advanced, his eyes locked onto Alan with an almost hypnotic intensity. Then, as suddenly as he had started, he stopped. His grin widened. He lifted a single, bony finger and pointed directly at Alan. Then, he ran. Alan bolted after him, his heart pounding. The smiling man moved fast, his limbs unnaturally flexible as he slipped through the alleyways like a shadow. No matter how hard Alan ran, he couldn't close the distance. The chase continued until Alan turned a corner, and the smiling man was gone. There were no doors, no exits, no possible hiding places. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Shaken, Alan returned to his car and reviewed the footage from his dashcam. The footage showed Alan stepping out, aiming his gun, but the streetlight was empty. There was no smiling man. No one had been there at all. Alan's blood ran cold. He had chased something that, according to the recording, didn't exist. The next day, another resident was reported missing. And the CCTV footage showed the same figure, standing outside their home at 2:13 a.m., grinning. Alan knew he was running out of time. He needed to find out who, or what, the smiling man was before another person disappeared. Digging through old case files, he found something chilling. The disappearances in Rockford dated back over 50 years. Every 10 years, for 2 years straight, people would vanish under the same circumstances, always at 2:13 a.m., always with the sighting of a grinning figure. Alan tracked down an elderly man named Samuel Grayson, one of the few who had been around during the earliest disappearances. Samuel agreed to meet him, but when Alan arrived at the man's home, he found the front door wide open. Inside, the house was in disarray, furniture overturned, deep scratch marks along the walls. And in the center of the living room was a single Polaroid photograph. Alan picked it up with trembling fingers. The photo showed a grinning man standing behind Samuel. The timestamp read, 2:13 a.m. The old man was never found. Alan knew he was dealing with something far beyond a normal crime. The smiling man wasn't just a person, he was something else. Something that had been haunting Rockford for decades. Determined to end it, Alan devised a plan. He would wait outside his own house at 2:13 a.m. and confront the entity head-on. That night, he sat on his porch, his gun loaded, his heart pounding. The street was deathly silent. As the minutes passed, Alan started to doubt himself. What if it had all been in his head? What if the smiling man was just a figment of his exhausted mind? Then, a shiver ran down his spine. The air felt heavier. The shadows grew darker. And at exactly 2:13 a.m., he felt a presence behind him. Slowly, he turned. The smiling man stood just inches away, his grin impossibly wide. Alan tried to raise his gun, but his body refused to move. He was frozen in place, his breath shallow. Then, the smiling man spoke. His voice was a whisper, yet it echoed in Alan's mind. "You see me now." Darkness swallowed everything. Alan woke up the next morning, lying on his porch. His gun was gone. His body ached as if he had been in a struggle, but there were no signs of a fight. Checking his phone, he found a notification. A new video had been uploaded to his personal cloud storage. With shaking hands, he pressed play. The footage showed Alan, sitting on his porch, staring blankly ahead. Then, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was the smiling man. He bent down, whispered something into Alan's ear, and then slowly turned to face the camera. His grin widened. And then the video cut to static. Alan left Rockford that night. He quit the force, changed his name, and moved across the country. But no matter where he went, he always felt watched. And every night, at 2:13 a.m., he would wake up to a notification on his phone. A new video had been uploaded. Each one showed a new victim. Each one ended the same way. With a smiling man looking directly at the camera. Grinning, Detective James Holloway had seen his fair share of brutal crimes, but nothing compared to what awaited him in the abandoned house on Blackwood Street. The house had a long history of urban legends, with whispers of people vanishing near it, never to be seen again. When a group of teenagers went missing after daring each other to enter the property, the case landed on James' desk. The first clue came from the sole survivor, a terrified boy named Alex Carter. He was found wandering the streets at dawn, covered in scratches, his eyes filled with unspeakable fear. When questioned at the hospital, all he could say was, "The basement. Don't go in the basement." James, along with his partner, Detective Lisa Monroe, arrived at the house later that evening. The decayed structure groaned in the wind, its windows shattered, and the door barely hanging on its hinges. Something about the house felt wrong, as if it was alive, watching their every move. They stepped inside cautiously. Dust and debris covered the floor, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. The furniture was overturned, claw marks stretched across the wooden walls, and old, dried blood stained the floorboards. James pulled out his flashlight, and the beam illuminated a door at the far end of the hallway. It was slightly ajar, leading down to the basement. Lisa swallowed hard. "This is where they went, isn't it?" James nodded. Only one way to find out. As they descended the creaking steps, an unnatural cold surrounded them. The basement was pitch black, the air heavy with something rotten. James scanned the room with his flashlight and immediately noticed a pattern of deep scratches on the walls, claw marks that looked almost inhuman. In the center of the basement was a rusted metal door, its edges stained with something dark. Chains lay broken on the floor, as if something had been kept locked away. James' pulse quickened. Lisa examined the markings. "These aren't normal scratches, James. Whatever did this? It's not human." Before James could respond, a faint noise echoed through the basement, a soft, shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet. Both detectives spun around, their flashlights flickering wildly. And then they saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, gaunt, with pale, almost translucent skin stretched tightly over its skeletal frame. Its eyes were sunken black voids, and its mouth twisted into a grotesque grin, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. Lisa gasped, stepping back. "What the hell is that?" The creature tilted its head, its grin widening as it lunged toward them with inhuman speed. James fired his gun, but the creature barely flinched. Lisa grabbed an iron pipe from the floor and swung at it, but the blow only seemed to enrage it. "Run!" James shouted, dragging Lisa toward the stairs. They stumbled up, the creature screeching behind them. As they reached the main floor, James kicked the basement door shut, slamming it just as the creature rammed against it from the other side. Lisa panted. "We need to burn this place down." James nodded. He grabbed his radio, calling for backup. Within minutes, the fire department arrived, setting the house ablaze. Flames consumed the cursed home, crackling as if the walls themselves screamed. As the fire burned, something horrifying happened. The creature stood in the flames, staring at them, its grin never fading. And then, just before the roof collapsed, it lifted one clawed hand and pointed directly at James. Then it was gone. A week later, James sat in his office, trying to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Lisa walked in, holding a file. "You need to see this," she said, handing it over. James flipped through the pages, old reports, dating back to the 1800s. Missing people. Strange disappearances. And a single photograph, taken in 1896, showing a man standing in front of the Blackwood house. A man with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. James' blood ran cold. A notification pinged on his phone. He checked it, and his breath hitched in his throat. A video had been uploaded to his private cloud storage. It was footage from his home security camera. The video showed his bedroom, dark and silent. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. The same grin. The same hollow eyes. It was inside his house. James' phone screen flickered, and a message appeared. You should have never entered the basement. Ethan Carter was no stranger to the dark corners of the internet. As an investigative journalist, he had exposed fraudulent businesses, criminal organizations, and even corrupt officials. But nothing had prepared him for what he was about to uncover. One evening, while researching for a new article, he stumbled upon a mysterious link in an encrypted forum known only as the Black Veil. The link had no description, only a single warning: once you enter, there's no going back. Ethan hesitated for a moment before clicking. The screen went black. Then, a blood-red title appeared, The Dark Web Death List. Below it was a series of names, each with a timer counting down. Some had mere hours left. Others had days. And beside each name was a single word: pending. At first, Ethan thought it was just another sick hoax. But when he searched the first name, his blood ran cold. The man had been reported dead only hours earlier, brutally murdered in his home. The second name? A woman who had died in a so-called accident just the day before. This wasn't a joke. It was real. Ethan's hands trembled as he scrolled down the list. His pulse stopped when he saw it. Ethan Carter, 48 hours, pending. A chill crawled down his spine. Someone had marked him for death. He slammed his laptop shut, heart pounding. He had to act fast. He needed to find out who was behind this site and why he was on the list. Grabbing his phone, he dialed his best friend, Detective Ryan Brooks. Ryan, I need your help. Now. Within minutes, Ethan was sitting across from Ryan at a downtown diner, explaining everything. Ryan listened intently, his face growing more concerned with every word. This sounds like a hit list, Ryan finally said. A contract-killing service hidden in the dark web. Then how do we stop it? Ethan demanded. Ryan exhaled. We need to track the source. But first, we need to keep you alive. They decided Ethan needed to go off the grid. Ryan set him up in a safe house, stripped of all electronics. Meanwhile, Ryan reached out to his cybercrime division, hoping to trace the site's origin. But every attempt led to dead ends, layers upon layers of encrypted networks designed to erase any trail. Then, 24 hours later, Ethan's phone, which he had turned off, inexplicably powered on. A new message appeared on the screen: You can't hide, Ethan. He barely had time to react before the lights in the safe house flickered, and the security system shut down. Someone was coming. Ethan grabbed the gun Ryan had left him and pressed himself against the wall. The front door creaked open, and slow, deliberate footsteps echoed through the house. A shadow moved in the hallway. Without thinking, Ethan fired. The figure collapsed with a grunt. He rushed forward, gun still raised, only to find a masked man bleeding out on the floor. His phone buzzed again. Congratulations. You just survived round 1. Ethan's breath hitched. This wasn't over. Ryan arrived minutes later, calling in backup. The masked man was dead, but his phone held a single clue, a cryptic message reading Executor 09 reporting failure. Ryan turned pale. There are more. They worked through the night, digging deeper into the site's origins. The breakthrough came when Ethan recognized a familiar name on the list: Michael Reeves, a corrupt businessman he had exposed years ago. The man had disappeared before facing trial. Could he be behind this? Ethan and Ryan traced old financial records and offshore accounts linked to Reeves. Finally, they found something: a hidden bunker in an abandoned factory outside the city. This is it, Ryan said. We end it tonight. Armed and ready, they stormed the factory. Inside, a row of screens displayed lit feeds from various locations. One screen showed Ethan's safe house. Another showed Ryan's apartment. They were being watched all along. And then, the voice spoke. Well, Mr. Carter. You weren't supposed to last this long. Michael Reeves emerged from the shadows, flanked by 2 heavily armed men. I must admit, Reeves continued, I underestimated you. But no matter. This ends now. Ethan exchanged a glance with Ryan. In a flash, they fired. Bullets tore through the room. One of Reeves' men went down, but the other tackled Ethan. They struggled, fists flying, before Ethan managed to grab a nearby pipe and drive it into the assassin's skull. Ryan shot Reeves in the leg before he could escape. The corrupt businessman fell to the ground, groaning in pain. "You think this is over?" Reeves sneered. "The death list isn't just me. It's bigger than you could ever imagine." Ryan knocked him unconscious as sirens wailed outside. The operation was over. In the weeks that followed, authorities dismantled the dark web death list. Dozens of high-profile criminals were arrested, their secrets laid bare. But despite their victory, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was still watching. Then, one night, as he was about to sleep, his laptop screen flickered to life. A new name appeared on the list. Ryan Brooks, 72 hours, pending. Ethan's blood ran cold. The death list wasn't over. It was just beginning.